I'm JT, and joining us now is Gene Petrino. He's with Survival Response, and he's a retired SWAT commander who's got a lot of great experience and regarded as one of the top workplace violence and active shooter experts in the industry. Gene, welcome in. Thank you so much for being here.
JT, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So when you retired as a SWAT commander, I can imagine some of the experiences that you've gone through and harrowing experiences and dangerous experiences. Can you share a couple of those that you went through where you really learned some good, tactics on how to deal with what was happening in that particular instance as a SWAT commander?
I don't think we have enough time. I will share probably one of the ones most applicable to what we'll be talking about today, which is the Fort Lauderdale Airport shooting. That was one of the most chaotic scenes I've been on. And I found that there were so many mistakes that were made, but nothing intentionally. What you have to realize is that all of these incidents that happen, they're just so fluid. You can't really ever be fully prepared. The tactical response from every agency in the county was absolutely phenomenal, but there were some logistical issues that kind of created more chaos than there needed to be. Mm-hmm. And it was just it's sort of the nature of the beast. Some people heard a helicopter taking off, and the rotors made it sound like they thought it was gunfire. Oh. So they reported another. So it was that kind of thing. But additionally, we really learned that we have to get a lot more in tune with, from law enforcement standpoint, working with each other. Mm-hmm. Communication is always a challenge because we typically, every agency has different radio procedures. So it opened our eyes to having to work more collectively. And additionally, you look at, tactics. Are we all doing the same tactics? Are we able to work together? Because what would end up happening there is we would be put in with, our team was put in with another team, and we might not do the same things. Luckily, Broward County, where I'm at, really worked well together, and we sort of had that worked out. Some of the issues really were more administrative that we had problems with, but it was a really eye-opening experience.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about active shooter situations, whether it's in a school or a workplace or in a mall or a church or wherever these days. They seem to be happening more frequently, and every time it happens, Democrats want to scream, "Take the guns away." And everybody knows that it's not the gun, it's the shooter. And what is going on that led to this? Were there red flags? And so lots of discussion towards mental illness now starting to finally happen. But if, in fact, one finds themselves in an active shooting situation, whether it's the workplace or a mall or in school, let's talk about how we can avoid and escape that active shooter. So where do you start if you're, let's say, speaking to a classroom at a high school and students and teachers involved at the same place, and you're bringing education to that school? Where do you start?
Well, the start of how to address these incidents is in prevention. We often talk about how do you respond once it starts happening, but really it's too late at that point. The focus really needs to be more on how do you identify a shooter before they become a shooter. And the fact is there's so much data out there to tell us how to do that. Every single shooter displays what's called a pathway to violence, and it always starts with a grievance. So you and I, we might not get a job promotion, or we might be turned down by a romantic partner, and that might get us really angry. And that's that grievance stage. That's where everyone starts going, oh, I don't know what to do. But most people can navigate those emotions, and they let it go and they move on. Some people aren't able to do that. They don't know how to do that. And what ends up happening is those grievances grow into violent ideation. And that violent ideation is really where things start to get dangerous. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that we teach everyone is, look at someone's behavior. If you have, let's say, a student who was getting really good, grades, or, was doing well socially in the school, and all of a sudden they start to withdraw because they failed a test, or, they were turned down by someone that they were attracted to, things like that. If they start pulling back from things, someone needs to intervene and talk to them, make sure that they're okay, because they need to be connected with people. What ends up happening, you start feeling like you're not part of anybody. You feel alone, and that just really starts to grow those feelings, that violent ideation. And once it gets there, it starts to go even further. Then they start thinking about, well, how would I carry it out? I always say it's sort of like if you've ever boiled milk to make, pudding or something like that, hot chocolate, you put it on there, it simmers a little bit, it bubbles, and before you know it, if you're not paying attention, it's going to blow over all over the stove, and you make a big mess. You have to take that off of the heat. And that's really what we try to teach, is that if you identify someone that's starting to go down that path, you could really stop them. But we don't talk about that enough. That's not it.
I totally agree with you there. If you see something, say something. But what happens a lot of times, school administrators don't want to pry. I don't want to get too involved here. Everybody's got their issues. We're going to try and work through this. Your thoughts on, seeing it, knowing it, talking to the person, officials, including counselors and law enforcement, and then just going, well, no crime's been committed, so we'll see you back in school Monday.
Yeah, that happens. It happens way too often, and I'm gonna stand up for law enforcement here for a minute.
Go ahead. Look, I'm pro law enforcement. I'm all about it.
No. Of course, a lot of times people think law enforcement can just do anything that they want, but there are laws that there's parameters. You cannot make an arrest because they don't fit a certain level of what we have to do. And it's frustrating because we will say this person's a problem, but we don't have the resources or ability to do anything with it. A lot of times it comes down to the public situation, the school to do something, the workplace, if an employee is causing a problem, they have to take action, either terminate the employee, get them help with, employee assistance programs, all these things. We can't do that. It's not a criminal act. We only work in criminal law. Mm-hmm. We don't act in civil law. Right. And these things start civilly. They start as a civil case. And when it gets to crimes and where we can do something, oftentimes it's too late.
Right.
So it's a problem. It's very difficult.
Well, and when it comes to schools too, there's a lot that has to be done to remove a kid from a public school. It's not like private schools where they don't have to put up with anything and can just remove the kid at a moment's notice. So, all right, let's talk about fast forwarding to all of a sudden finding yourself in an active shooter situation, either in a school or in a mall. What do you suggest people do if all of a sudden they hear gunshot and people are scrambling? What to do?
Okay, well, the first thing that you really should do anywhere you go, and it's if you think about almost anybody in the military and law enforcement, we're always sitting with our backs to the wall looking at the entrance to places. And it's because we're always situationally aware of where we are. You should always look to see where the exits are, and you should have at least 3 routes of escape if you have to. It might feel weird in the beginning. You're kind of looking all over the place, but soon you start to see how the layout of a lot of places are very similar. You see something in the front, you see something on the side, something on the back, as far as exits. And where you can go if something happens. If it happens on this side of where I'm at, I can go to the other side, or vice versa. So you always want to know where your exits are. That is probably the biggest piece of advice I can give anybody to surviving one of these, is knowing how to get out.
What about backpacks that are now bulletproof? They're coming out with these for kids to carry. Good idea? Overreaction? What are your thoughts?
Both. I will say they're both an overreaction. I think they're also not a horrible idea either. I think anything that you can do to protect your children or yourself is not a bad idea. But you have to understand that the phrase bulletproof is not a good choice of words, because there's nothing that's really bulletproof. Backpacks and shields and things that they're selling, they're going to offer some protection. When you get to something that stops rifle calibers, you're talking about a considerable amount of weight most of the time, especially for a child. You're talking, several pounds, and you're talking thick, ceramic plates or steel,
right.
And it's not practical to do. Now, I have a backpack that's got a bullet resistant pouch on it, but I also train with it. I'm also know how to use it and how I move with it. So if you're going to buy this, the truth is, how are you going to utilize this in a situation? Are you going to think about it? How are you going to move? You really should practice with it. Honestly, it's about being familiar with what the ballistic protection is and how you would actually use it in a situation.
All right. Gene Petrino, Survival Response is who he is with, training lots and lots of folks, CEOs and companies on how to deal with active shooters. But I think you hit the nail on the head. We got to deal with it before it happens, because by the time it happens, a lot of times too late. Thank you, Gene, so much. I appreciate you. Happy holidays.